Everyone in New York's underworld knew the name Rocco Moretti. He was a man who didn't just break bones, he broke spirits. But the night he dragged a trembling, clumsy waitress named Stella into his private underground ring, he made the first fatal miscalculation of his life. He thought he was toying with a frightened mouse. He didn't see the calluses on her knuckles or the way her weight shifted perfectly to her heels. He didn't know that the woman shaking in the oversized apron wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of what she would do to him if she finally stopped holding back. The predator was about to become the prey. The air inside. The Obsidian Manhattan's most exclusive members-only club smelled of expensive leather, Cuban tobacco, and fear. It was a specific kind of fear, the kind that vibrated silently beneath the clinking of baccarat crystal glasses and the hum of low conversation. This was the domain of Rocco Moretti, the capo dei capi of the East Coast, a man whose net worth was rumored to rival small countries and whose temper was as volatile as a loaded gun. Stella adjusted her thick, black-rimmed glasses, keeping her head down as she balanced a heavy tray of hors d'oeuvres. She had been working at the Obsidian for 3 weeks. In that time, she had perfected the art of being invisible. She wore her uniform 2 sizes too big to hide the definition in her shoulders and arms. She walked with a slight awkward shuffle, masking the natural predatory grace of a woman who had spent 15 years training in the brutal fighting pits of Eastern Europe. Here she wasn't the Wraith, the ring name she had abandoned 6 months ago after a fight went wrong in Berlin. Here she was, just Stella, the clumsy girl, the nobody. "More wine," a voice commanded from the VIP booth in the corner. Stella froze. It was the center table, the lion's den. Rocco Moretti sat in the middle of the plush velvet banquet, looking like a dark prince on a throne. He was undeniably handsome, with sharp, angular features, eyes the color of cold espresso, and a tailored Tom Ford suit that cost more than Stella's entire existence. But there was a cruelty in the set of his jaw that warned people to keep their distance. Surrounding him were his lieutenants, Luca, a massive man with a scar running down his neck, and a visiting associate from the Chicago outfit named Victor. "I said more wine," Victor snapped, slamming his hand on the table. Stella hurried forward, clutching a bottle of 1996 Chateau Margaux. "Yes, sir. Right away." Her voice was soft, intentionally breathy and weak. She approached the table, her eyes fixed on the tablecloth. The cardinal rule of her new life was simple. Do not draw attention. As she uncorked the bottle, Victor, clearly intoxicated and looking for entertainment, shot his hand out and grabbed Stella's wrist. "Look at this one, Rocco," Victor sneered, pulling Stella off balance. "Pretty face hidden behind those ugly glasses. Why do you hire such frumpy staff in a place like this?" The wine bottle wobbled in Stella's hand. Her instinct, honed by thousands of hours of combat, screamed at her. "Snap the wrist, pivot, elbow to the temple." She forced the instinct down, letting herself stumble instead. "Please, sir, let go." "Victor, leave the help alone," Rocco said, though he didn't look up from the folder of documents he was reading. His voice was bored, indifferent. He didn't care about Stella's safety. He cared about the noise. "Just having fun, boss." Victor laughed, yanking Stella harder. "Come here, sweetheart. Take those glasses off." The sudden jerk caused the wine bottle to tilt. Red liquid, thick and dark like blood, splashed out of the bottle. It missed the glass entirely and cascaded directly onto Rocco Moretti's pristine white dress shirt and the lapel of his charcoal suit jacket. The music in the club seemed to stop. Every conversation within a 30-foot radius died instantly. Victor released Stella's wrist as if it were burning hot. He paled. "Rocco. Rocco slowly closed the folder. He looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, then slowly raised his eyes to meet Stella's. For the first time, Stella looked directly at him. His eyes were terrifying, void of emotion, calculating and cold. "Do you know what this suit is made of?" Rocco asked softly. His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried across the silent room. I'm so sorry, sir," Stella stammered, dropping into her act. She grabbed a napkin and reached out, but Luca the bodyguard intercepted her hand, squeezing her fingers painfully. "Don't touch him," Luca growled. Rocco stood up. He towered over her 6'3" of pure intimidation. He took the napkin from her hand, wiped a spot of wine from his chin, and dropped the cloth onto the floor. "Vicuna wool," Rocco said. "It costs $12,000, and the wine you just wasted was another $3,000. "I'll pay for it," Stella said, her voice trembling. "I'll work it off." "Please." Rocco laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You're a waitress. You make, what, $15 an hour plus tips. It would take you 3 years to pay for this laundry bill." He stepped closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of sandalwood and danger. He was studying her, looking for the fear waiting for her to cry. That's what they always did. They cried, they begged, they offered him favors. But Stella didn't cry. Behind the thick lenses of her glasses, her eyes remained strangely steady. She was breathing rhythmically, in through the nose, out through the mouth, controlling her heart rate. Rocco noticed it. A flicker of confusion passed through his eyes. Most people shook uncontrollably when he loomed over them. She was standing still, too still. "You have good balance," Rocco murmured, almost to himself. He suddenly lashed out a backhand slap, aimed purely to humiliate her, to knock the glasses off her face. It wasn't a lethal strike, just a disrespectful one. It happened in a fraction of a second. Stella didn't think. Her body betrayed her. Before his hand could connect with her cheek, her head slipped to the left, a microscopic movement, a slip in boxing terms, and her left hand shot up to check his forearm, redirecting the energy of his blow harmlessly into the air. Silence. Rocco's hand hovered in the empty space where her face had been a millisecond ago. He looked at his own hand, then back at her. Stella realized her mistake instantly. She immediately hunched her shoulders, looking at the floor. I flinched. I'm sorry." Rocco wasn't buying it. The boredom in his eyes had vanished, replaced by a sharp, predatory curiosity. He had thrown that slap with the speed that had taken down rival hitmen. A clumsy waitress doesn't dodge Rocco Moretti by accident. He grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. "You didn't flinch," he whispered. "You slipped the jab." He released her and turned to Luca. "Clear the room. Everyone out. Now." "Boss?" Luca asked, confused. "I said everyone out," Rocco roared. As the terrified patrons scurried toward the exits, Rocco turned back to Stella, unbuttoning his wine-stained jacket and tossing it onto the leather seat. He rolled up the sleeves of his white shirt, revealing forearms corded with muscle and covered in tattoos. "You owe me $15,000, Rocco said, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. "And since you can't pay with money, we're going to negotiate a different form of payment." Stella took a step back. "I don't do that kind of thing, sir." Rocco smirked. "Get your mind out of the gutter. I don't want your body in my bed." I want to see what you're hiding under that apron. He pointed to the heavy iron door at the back of the VIP room. Downstairs, the gym. If you can last 3 minutes in the ring with me without getting knocked out, I'll forget the debt. I'll even give you a tip. Stella's heart hammered against her ribs. The gym. The ring. It was the one place she couldn't go. If she fought, she would reveal herself. If she revealed herself, the people hunting her would find her. And if I refuse? She asked quietly. Rocco pulled a silver lighter from his pocket and flicked the lid open and closed. Clink, clink. Then Victor here takes you out to the alley and teaches you a lesson about respecting your betters. And trust me, Victor doesn't know when to stop. Stella looked at Victor, who was cracking his knuckles with a sadistic grin. Then she looked at Rocco. The arrogant kingpin thought he was challenging a waitress to a humiliating beatdown to blow off some steam. He thought he was the shark in the tank. Stella slowly untied her apron. She took off her glasses, folding them neatly, and placing them on the table. Without the frames, her eyes were striking piercing green, sharp as cut glass. 3 minutes, she said, her voice no longer trembling. It was flat, cold, and composed. Rocco's smile widened, but there was a flicker of doubt in his gut he couldn't explain. 3 minutes, sweetheart. Try not to die. The basement of the Obsidian was a stark contrast to the velvet luxury above. It was a cavernous space of exposed brick and concrete, smelling of stale sweat iron and bleach. In the center stood a regulation-sized boxing ring, the canvas stained with faint dark patches that scrubbers couldn't quite remove. This was where the Moretti family settled disputes that couldn't be solved with money. Rocco stepped into the ring, bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet. He was good. Stella could see that immediately. He moved with the fluid confidence of a man who trained regularly. He wasn't a professional, but he was a brawler, strong, aggressive, and used to winning through sheer force and intimidation. Luca stood by the bell looking nervous. Victor leaned against the ropes holding a tumbler of scotch, laughing. 500 says she starts crying in 30 seconds, Rocco. Make it 1,000, Rocco replied, not taking his eyes off Stella. Come on, get in. Stella stood outside the ropes. She had removed her waitress uniform to reveal a simple grey tank top and black leggings she wore underneath. Her arms were slender, but defined the muscle belly, long and dense. She kicked off her cheap work shoes, stepping onto the canvas barefoot. She felt the texture of the mat under her feet, and a rush of adrenaline, old and familiar, flooded her system. It was a drug she had been clean from for 6 months. The phantom was waking up. Control, she told herself. Don't knock him out. Just survive. Defend. Make it look like luck. Gloves? Stella asked, looking at the rack on the wall. Bare knuckle, Rocco said, raising his fists. I want to feel it when I hit you, unless you're scared. He was trying to provoke her. He wanted her to be angry, sloppy. Stella didn't respond. She simply walked to the center of the ring and raised her hands. But she didn't adopt a traditional boxing stance. She kept her hands open palms facing him, a defensive posture that looked amateurish to the untrained eye, but was actually a variation of a Muay Thai guard designed to catch and trap. Time! Luca yelled, slapping the canvas. Rocco lunged immediately. He didn't hold back. He threw a straight right aimed directly at her jaw. It was a punch meant to end things instantly. Stella saw the telegraph in his shoulder muscle before his arm even moved. Time seemed to slow down. She could have slipped inside and shattered his ribs with an uppercut. She could have swept his leg and cracked his skull on the canvas. Instead, she did the bare minimum. She ducked frantically, making it look like a panic reaction. Rocco's fist sailed over her head, the wind of it rushing past her ear. Slippery. Rocco grunted. He turned and swung a heavy left hook. Stella stumbled backward, tripping over her own feet intentionally and falling against the ropes. The hook missed her nose by an inch. "Get up," Rocco barked, enjoying the chase. "Stop running." Stella scrambled up, breathing hard. "I can't do this," she cried out, adding a quiver to her voice. 2 minutes left, Victor jeered from the sidelines. "Hit her, Rocco ruin the face." Rocco cornered her. He unleashed a flurry of body shots. Stella covered up, bringing her elbows tight to her ribs. This was the shell defense. To Rocco, it looked like she was cowering. In reality, she was catching every punch on her forearms and elbows, protecting her vital organs. He hits hard, she noted analytically. Good power. Poor accuracy. He overcommits his weight. One of Rocco's punches slipped through her guard and grazed her cheekbone. The skin split. A trickle of warm blood ran down her face. The sight of blood seemed to trigger something in Rocco. His eyes darkened. He wound up for a haymaker, a massive telegraphed punch that left his entire midsection exposed. It was instinct, pure, undeniable muscle memory. As Rocco threw the punch, Stella's body took over. She couldn't help it. The opening was too perfect. She dropped her level pivoting on her right foot. She drove her fist upward, not with full power, but with perfect precision, aiming for the solar plexus. Thud. The sound was sickeningly wet. Rocco's eyes bulged. The air left his lungs in a violent whoosh. He staggered back, clutching his chest, his face turning a shade of purple. He gagged, trying to inhale, but his diaphragm was paralyzed. Silence descended on the gym again. Victor dropped his glass. It shattered loudly on the concrete. Stella stood there, her chest heaving. She realized she had broken character. A waitress doesn't know how to throw a liver shot. A waitress doesn't know exactly where the solar plexus is. Rocco dropped to one knee, wheezing. He looked up at her, water streaming from his eyes, due to the lack of oxygen. But there was no anger in his face anymore. There was recognition. He gasped, sucking in a ragged breath. Who are you?" Stella backed away toward the ropes. "I got lucky. You slipped." "Bullshit," Rocco wheezed, forcing himself to stand up. He was in pain, immense pain, but he ignored it. He wiped the sweat from his forehead. "That was a liver shovel hook. Professional. Concise." He walked toward her, not aggressively this time, but with a terrifying intensity. "You're not a waitress. You're a fighter." "I took a self-defense class at the Y," Stella lied, looking for an exit. "Don't lie to me." Rocco roared, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "I know violence when I see it. You move like a killer." He stopped 2 feet from her. He looked at the cut on her cheek, then down at her hands. He grabbed her right hand, forcing her palm open. He traced the thick yellow calluses on her knuckles with his thumb. "These aren't from carrying trays," he said softly. Suddenly, the heavy iron door at the top of the stairs burst open. "Boss, we have a problem." It was the bouncer from upstairs. Rocco didn't look away from Stella. "I'm busy." "It's the gallows," the bouncer shouted, panic in his voice. "They're outside. 3 SUVs. They say they're coming in for Victor." Victor, the drunk associate, suddenly looked sober. "Rocco, you gotta protect me. The gallows. They think I skimmed their shipment in Jersey." Rocco finally released Stella's hand. He turned to Victor. with a look of disgust. "You brought a war to my doorstep." "I didn't know they knew I was here," Victor pleaded. A loud crash echoed from upstairs. Gunfire. The distinctive pop, pop, pop of semi-automatic pistols. "They're breaching the front," Luca shouted, pulling a gun from his waistband. "Boss, we need to get you to the safe room." Rocco looked at Stella. "You can leave through the back. Go." Stella hesitated. She should go. This wasn't her fight. She should run, disappear, find a new city, change her name again. But then she heard the footsteps thundering down the stairs. The door flew open, and 3 men in tactical gear with suppressed MP5s burst into the gym. They weren't just low-level thugs. They moved like soldiers. "Kill everyone," the lead gunman commanded. Luca fired back, taking cover behind the ring post. Rocco dove behind a stack of gym mats, pulling a pistol from an ankle holster. But Stella was in the open. The lead gunman raised his weapon, aiming directly at her chest. Rocco saw it. "Get down," he screamed, but Stella didn't get down. She saw the gunman's finger tighten on the trigger. She saw the angle of the barrel. In that moment, Stella Corves died, and the Phantom was reborn. She didn't run away from the gun. She ran toward it. The distance between Stella and the lead gunman was 15 feet. In the world of ballistics, that is a lifetime. But Stella moved with a burst of speed that defied physics, propelling herself off her back foot like a sprinter leaving the blocks. The gunman, a seasoned mercenary named Kroll, adjusted his aim. He expected her to zigzag or dive. He didn't expect a frontal assault. By the time his brain registered her trajectory, she was inside the dead zone, the space too close for a long rifle to be effective. Stella slapped the barrel of the MP5 upward with her left palm. The gun discharged, sending a spray of bullets into the concrete ceiling, showering them in dust. Simultaneously, she stepped in, driving her right elbow into Kroll's throat. The sound of cartilage crushing was audible over the ringing gunshots. Kroll dropped the weapon, clutching his neck, choking on his own collapsed windpipe. Stella didn't pause to watch him fall. She caught the falling MP5 by the strap, spun around, and used Kroll's slumping body as a human shield. The other 2 gunmen opened fire. Bullets thudded into Kroll's tactical vest, jerking his body violently against Stella's back. Rocco, watching from behind the stack of mats, felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. He had seen professional hitmen work. He had seen Mossad agents in Tel Aviv and Bratva enforcers in Moscow. But he had never seen anything like this. This wasn't brawling. It was geometry. It was the absolute efficiency of movement. Stella dropped to a knee, peering around Kroll's waist. She didn't spray and pray. She fired 2 single shots. Crack. Crack. The second gunman, a heavy-set man near the door, dropped with a hole in his forehead. The third gunman, realizing the tide had turned, scrambled for cover behind the ring. He leveled his weapon at Luca, who was pinned down and reloading. "Luca, move!" Rocco screamed, breaking cover to provide suppressing fire. But Stella was faster. She tossed the empty submachine gun aside and sprinted toward the ring. She vaulted over the top rope, a move that required immense core strength, and used the momentum to swing her legs out, catching the third gunman in the head with a flying scissor kick as he tried to stand up. The force of the impact knocked him unconscious instantly. He crumbled to the floor, his helmet clattering away. Silence returned to the gym heavier than before. The air was thick with the smell of cordite and blood. Victor, the Chicago associate, was cowering in the corner, sobbing. "They're dead? Are they dead?" Stella stood in the center of the carnage, her chest heaving. The adrenaline was beginning to fade, replaced by the cold, hard reality of what she had just done. She had exposed herself. The mask was gone. She turned to look at Rocco. Rocco slowly lowered his pistol. He stepped over the debris, his eyes locked on her. He didn't look at his dead attackers. He only looked at the waitress with the messy bun and the blood-stained tank top. "You cleared a room of 3 Spec Ops mercenaries in 14 seconds, Rocco said. His voice was devoid of his usual arrogance. It was hollow, filled with a dawning, terrifying realization. Stella didn't answer. She walked over to where her glasses lay on the floor, picked them up and put them on. It was a futile gesture, an attempt to put the costume back on, but it was too late. "We need to leave," Stella said, her voice raspy. "That was just the breach team. The cleanup crew will be here in 2 minutes. If the gallows are serious, they'll burn this building down." Rocco nodded, snapping back into general mode. "Luca, get the car around back. Now!" Luca, looking at Stella with wide, fearful eyes, scrambled up the stairs. "Victor, let's go," Rocco barked, grabbing the sobbing man by the collar. "I can't walk. My legs are jelly," Victor wailed. Rocco slapped him hard across the face. "Walk or die. Your choice." They moved toward the emergency exit in the back alley. Stella took point, moving with a gun she had scavenged from one of the fallen men. She checked the corners, cleared the hallway, and signaled for them to move. Rocco watched her back. He noticed a tattoo on her right shoulder blade, partially visible through the tear in her tank top. It was a black chess piece. A knight. The memory hit him like a freight train. 2 years ago. A story from his cousin in Berlin. An underground fight ring where a woman had defeated the heavyweight champion of the European circuit. They called her the Phantom. She fought in a mask. She never spoke. She vanished after the fight, leaving behind a trail of broken men and a legend that she was a ghost. Rocco felt a strange sensation in his chest. It wasn't fear anymore. It was fascination. The clumsy, frumpy waitress he had tried to bully was the most dangerous woman on the continent, and she was currently the only thing keeping him alive. The safe house wasn't a house. It was a fortress in the sky. It was a penthouse apartment on the 90th floor of the Steinway Tower overlooking Central Park. The windows were bulletproof polycarbonate, the walls were reinforced, and the elevator required a retinal scan to access. Luca collapsed onto the leather sofa, bleeding from a graze on his arm. Victor immediately ran to the bar, pouring himself a drink with shaking hands. Rocco didn't sit. He paced the floor, his energy kinetic and angry. Stella stood by the window looking out at the city lights. She had refused to sit down. She still held the gun, though she had lowered it. She looked out of place in the ultra-modern luxury, covered in grime and sweat, barefoot and bruised. "Put the gun down," Rocco commanded, turning to face her. "You're safe here." Stella turned slowly. "Safe is a relative term, Mr. Moretti. You have a leak. The gallows knew exactly where you were and who you were with. That implies someone in your inner circle sold you out." Victor choked on his drink. "Don't look at me. I almost died." "I'm not looking at you," Stella said coolly. "You're too incompetent to arrange a hit like that. You were the bait, not the architect." Rocco narrowed his eyes. "You talk a lot for a mute waitress." He walked over to a polished mahogany table and threw a towel at her. "Clean yourself up. You're bleeding." Stella caught the towel but didn't move to wipe the blood from her cheek. "I need to go. I settled your debt. I saved your life. We're even." "Even," Rocco laughed, a harsh, barking sound. You think you can just walk out of here? You just killed 3 men in my basement. The police will be swarming. The obsidian. Your face is on the security cameras. I erased the tapes, Stella said calmly. Before I came upstairs to the VIP room, I looped the security feed. Old habit. Rocco stopped pacing. He stared at her, genuinely impressed. Who are you? I'm nobody. Liar. Rocco closed the distance between them. He stopped inches from her, using his height to try and intimidate her. But she didn't flinch. She met his gaze with that same terrifying green intensity. I saw the tattoo, Rocco whispered. The knight on your shoulder. Stella's eyes widened slightly. It was the first crack in her armor. Berlin. Rocco continued, watching her reaction closely. 2 years ago. The Iron Pit. You fought a man named Dragos. He was 300 pounds of steroid muscle. You broke his femur in the 2nd round. Stella remained silent, her jaw tight. They called you the Phantom, Rocco said, savoring the name. Rumor was you were ex-Special Forces, or maybe a rogue intelligence asset. You disappeared after you refused to throw a fight for the local syndicate. They put a bounty on your head, 5 million euros. He leaned in closer, his lips brushing her ear. Is that why you're hiding in New York, wearing ugly glasses and spilling wine on my suits? Because half of the European underworld wants you dead. Stella shoved him back. It was a hard, forceful push that sent him stumbling a few steps. You don't know what you're talking about, she hissed. I know exactly what I'm talking about, Rocco countered, regaining his balance. And I know that if I make one phone call to my contacts in Berlin, a hit squad will be on a plane within the hour to collect that bounty. Stella raised the gun. Don't threaten me, Rocco. I'm not threatening you, Rocco said, raising his hands in a mock surrender. I'm offering you a job. Stella blinked. What? The gallows are coming for me, Rocco said, his voice turning serious. They broke the truce. This is war. I have soldiers, I have hitmen, I have muscle like Luca. But I don't have you. He gestured to her. I need someone who can see things before they happen. Someone who can clear a room in 14 seconds. I need a bodyguard who isn't afraid to die, because apparently you have nothing left to lose. I'm not a bodyguard, Stella spat, and I don't work for criminals. You are a criminal, Rocco pointed out. You just killed 3 people, and you're hiding from a past that is undoubtedly bloodier than my present. He walked to the bar and poured a glass of water. He held it out to her. Here's the deal, Stella. Or whatever your real name is. You stay with me. You help me crush the gallows. You protect my back until this war is over. And in return, Stella asked, eyeing the water. She was parched. In return, Rocco said, his eyes locking onto hers with a burning intensity. I use my resources to wipe your slate clean. I have people in Interpol. I have hackers who can scrub databases. I can make the bounty disappear. I can give you your life back. A real life. Not this shadow existence. Stella hesitated. It was the one thing she wanted more than anything. Freedom. To stop looking over her shoulder. To stop wearing the mask of the clumsy girl. How do I know I can trust you? She asked. You can't, Rocco admitted brutally. But right now, I'm the only option you have. You walk out that door, you're alone against the gallows, the police, and the people hunting you from Europe. You stay here. You're under the protection of the Moretti family. Stella looked at the gun in her hand. then at Rocco. She was tired of running. She was tired of hiding. And strangely, despite his arrogance, despite his cruelty in the club, there was something about Rocco Moretti that drew her in. He saw her. For the first time in years, someone actually saw her. She engaged the safety on the pistol and placed it on the table. "If you cross me," Stella said, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper, "I won't break your leg. I'll stop your heart." Rocco smiled. It wasn't the smirk of a bully this time. It was the smile of a king who had just found his queen. "I'm counting on it," he said. Suddenly, Victor's phone buzzed on the bar counter. He picked it up, read the text, and turned pale. "Rocco," Victor stammered. "The news. It's all over the news." Rocco grabbed the remote and turned on the giant flat-screen TV on the wall. Breaking news flashed across the screen. A reporter stood outside the obsidian blue lights flashing behind her. "Massacre at the exclusive Manhattan club. Police have identified the owner Rocco Moretti as a person of interest, but sources say they are also looking for a woman. A waitress believed to be an accomplice." The screen changed to show a grainy photo from a traffic camera. It was Stella and Rocco running into the alley. It was blurry, but her face was visible. "They have your face," Rocco said grimly. "The hunt is on." Stella stared at the screen. Her anonymity was gone. The ghost was public. "We need to move," Stella said, her mind already shifting into tactical mode. "This place is too high profile. If the police know, the gallows know." "I have a villa in the Hamptons," Rocco said. "Fortified." "Too obvious," Stella countered. "They'll expect you to go to ground in a fortress. We need to go somewhere they won't look. Somewhere public, but invisible." "Where?" Rocco asked. Stella looked at him, a spark of challenge in her eyes. "My apartment in Queens. It's a dump. No security, no doorman, and nobody knows it exists." Rocco looked at his $3,000 shoes, then at the dirt on Stella's leggings. The King of New York hiding in a Queens tenement. It was absurd. It was insulting. It was perfect. "Fine," Rocco said. "Take me to your castle, princess." The ride to Queens was a study in tension. They had abandoned Rocco's conspicuous armored SUV 3 blocks from the Obsidian, swapping it for a stolen Honda Civic that Stella hotwired in under 30 seconds. Rocco sat in the passenger seat, his knees pressed against the dashboard, looking like a caged tiger in a cardboard box. Luca was squeezed into the back with a trembling Victor. They parked 2 streets away from a crumbling brick tenement building in Astoria. The neighborhood was quiet, the air smelling of exhaust fumes and damp pavement. "This is it?" Rocco asked, eyeing the graffiti-sprayed front door. "I own storage units nicer than this." "It has 4 exits, thin walls, so I can hear movement and neighbors who don't ask questions," Stella replied, killing the engine. "Get out. Keep your heads down." The apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up. It was a studio barely larger than a prison cell. A single mattress lay on the floor, neatly made with military precision. A small table held a laptop and a stack of burner phones. There were no pictures on the walls, no decorations, no plants. It was the home of a ghost, someone ready to leave in 5 minutes and leave no trace behind. Luca stood by the door, his massive frame blocking the peephole. Victor slumped into the only chair, nursing a bottle of vodka he had smuggled from the club. Rocco walked to the window, peering through the blinds. "If the gallows find us here, we're trapped. It's a fatal funnel." "They won't find us unless someone tells them where we are," Stella said, casting a sharp glance at Victor. She moved to a loose floorboard near the kitchenette, pried it open, and pulled out a first aid kit that looked more like a trauma bag from a war zone. "Take off your shirt," she ordered Rocco. Rocco raised an eyebrow. "At least buy me dinner first. You took a liver shot that dropped you to your knees, and you hit the floor hard during the firefight. I need to check for internal bleeding," Stella said, her voice clinical. "Shirt off." Rocco unbuttoned his stained dress shirt and let it drop. His torso was a map of violent scars from knives, bullets, and wire. But currently, a massive, darkening bruise bloomed across his ribs where Stella had punched him. She put on latex gloves and began to palpate the area. Her fingers were cool and firm. When she pressed against his lower ribs, Rocco hissed in pain. "Nothing's broken," she concluded, applying a cooling gel. "But you're going to feel that for weeks." "You hit like a truck," Rocco grumbled, looking down at her. She was so close he could smell the faint scent of vanilla beneath the gunpowder and sweat. Without the oversized uniform, without the act, she was captivating. Her movements were economical, intelligent. "I pulled at the punch," Stella murmured, taping a bandage over a cut on his shoulder. "If I had thrown it with full hip rotation, I would have ruptured the organ." Rocco caught her wrist. The air in the tiny room suddenly felt heavy, charged with static. "Why didn't you?" Stella looked up, her green eyes locking with his. "Why didn't I kill you? Yes, you hate men like me. Arrogant, violent. I treated you like garbage." "You did," Stella agreed. "But you didn't look at me with pity. You looked at me with a challenge. And when the shooting started, you tried to protect me. You told me to get down." She pulled her hand away gently. "I'm used to men using me as a shield, Rocco. You're the first one who tried to be the shield for me." Rocco fell silent. He watched her move around the small room, checking the locks, turning off the lights, so they wouldn't cast shadows. He realized he was seeing the real woman beneath the layers of trauma and survival instinct, and he wanted to know everything. "Who taught you?" Rocco asked into the darkness. "Berlin is where you fought. But where did you learn to shoot? To slip a jab like that?" Stella sat on the edge of the mattress, cleaning the stolen pistol. "My father. He was difficult. He wanted a son. He got a daughter. So he decided to build the son he wanted out of the daughter he had." "Is he still alive?" "No." Stella said, her voice flat. "I killed him." The admission hung in the air. Victor snored loudly in the chair, oblivious. Luca shifted by the door. Rocco didn't flinch. In his world, patricide wasn't a sin. Sometimes it was a necessity. Was it justified? "It was survival," Stella said. She looked at Rocco. "He sold me to the fight syndicates when I was 16. I escaped when I was 22. That was the night he died." Rocco walked over and sat next to her on the mattress. The proximity was intoxicating. He reached out and touched a stray lock of hair that had fallen near her face. "You're not a waitress, Stella," he whispered. "And you're not a monster. You're a queen in exile." Stella felt a shiver trace down her spine. She leaned into his touch just for a second, allowing herself the luxury of human contact she had denied herself for years. "We have one bed," she said, her voice husky. "I'll take the floor," Rocco offered, surprising even himself. "Don't be stupid. You're injured," Stella said. She lay down her back to the wall, the gun under her pillow. "We share. Back to back. If anyone comes through that door, we wake up fighting." Rocco lay down beside her. The mattress was narrow, his back pressed against hers. He could feel the warmth of her body, the steady rhythm of her breathing. For the first time in 10 years, Rocco Moretti didn't feel the need to sleep with one eye open. He had the phantom guarding his 6. Dawn broke over Queens, casting a grey, sickly light into the studio apartment. Stella was awake before the sun, her internal clock wired for danger. She carefully slid out from under Rocco's arm. In his sleep, the Mafia Don held on to her, not like a weapon, but like a lifeline. She moved silently to the table where the burner phones lay stacked. Victor was still slumped in the chair, snoring, oblivious to the fact that he was breathing on borrowed time. Stella had cloned his SIM card during the night. She opened her laptop and pulled up the logs. Her blood ran cold. 3 outgoing messages sent at 2:00 a.m. Destination: unknown number. Message: we are in Astoria, 4th floor, brick building. Message: Waitress is the shooter. Message: bring the heavy crew. Stella didn't yell. The cold calm of the phantom descended over her. She walked over to the chair, grabbed a handful of Victor's greasy hair, and slammed his face into the wooden armrest. Victor woke with a shriek. Rocco was up instantly, gun drawn. Stella. What is it? He sold us, Stella said, throwing the laptop onto Victor's lap. Rocco read the screen. His face went stone cold. You sold us to the gallows after I saved your miserable life. They threatened my mother, Victor blubbered, spitting blood. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice, Rocco said, raising his pistol. Don't kill him, Stella commanded, checking the magazine of her own weapon. He's a liability dead, but an asset alive. If he's texting them, they are listening. She shoved the phone into Victor's trembling hands. Text them back. Tell them the bodyguard is dead, and the door is unlocked. Why? Luca asked from his post by the window. Because I want them to come through that door thinking they've already won, Stella said. She kicked the mattress onto its side, creating a barricade. Rocco, take cover. Victor, sit by the door. If you make a sound to warn them, I will shoot you myself. Victor sat on the floor, weeping silently. Ping. They replied. Victor whispered, terrified. ETA 30 seconds. Ready? Stella whispered to Rocco behind the mattress. Born ready. The door didn't just open, it exploded inward. A battering ram splintered the wood, and 2 men in dark windbreakers surged in, expecting an easy kill. They saw Victor sitting on the floor and grinned. Bang! Stella's shot took the lead man in the throat. Rocco popped up and double-tapped the second. Suppressing fire! Stella yelled as the hallway erupted with automatic gunfire. Bullets shredded the drywall, filling the tiny room with choking white dust. Victor screamed, curled in a ball, until a stray bullet from his own allies silenced him forever. We can't hold this, Rocco shouted over the roar. They have too many men. The window. Stella grabbed a flashbang grenade from her tactical bag, a relic of her past life. She pulled the pin and tossed it into the hall. Boom! A blinding light and concussive blast shook the building. Seizing the confusion, Stella hauled Rocco toward the fire escape. Go up to the roof. They scrambled out into the biting morning air, metal stairs clanging under their feet. Luca followed close behind, firing wild shots to cover their retreat. They reached the roof, a flat expanse of tar and gravel. There. Stella pointed to the neighboring building. It was 6 feet away across an alleyway that dropped 4 stories down. We have to jump. Jump or die, Rocco roared. The roof access door burst open behind them. 6 gallo soldiers spilled out, weapons raised. Stella didn't hesitate. She launched herself into the air, landing in a roll on the adjacent roof. Rocco followed, landing hard but safe. They turned to look for Luca. The big bodyguard sprinted for the edge. He jumped. But a single shot rang out. A bullet caught him in mid-air. His momentum faltered. He missed the ledge by inches. "Luca!" Rocco lunged forward, screaming. He watched helplessly as his most loyal soldier fell crashing into the dumpster 4 stories below. Rocco froze, staring into the abyss. They killed him. They killed Luca. And they will kill you too if you don't move. Stella grabbed his face, slapping him hard. "Move, Rocco!" She dragged him away from the edge just as bullets began to chip the concrete around them. They sprinted across the Queen's rooftops, a desperate parkour race, against death finally sliding down a fire escape 5 blocks away. They collapsed in a narrow alley behind a dumpster, gasping for air. Rocco was shaking not from fear, but from a rage that consumed him. "They're going to pay," he hissed, tears mixing with the dust on his face. "I'm going to burn the gallows to the ground." "You will?" Stella said, her voice steady. "But not today. Today, we survive." Rocco looked at her. He had lost his suit, his money, his bodyguard, and his crown. He had nothing left, except her. "Where do we go?" he asked, his voice breaking. "I have no safe houses left." Stella stood up and holstered her gun. She extended a hand to the fallen king of New York. "You have me," she said. "And I know a place where the Mafia doesn't go. A place where the Phantom used to train. We go there. We heal, and then we take back your city." Rocco looked at her scarred, calloused hand. He took it. "Lead the way," he said. Iron Eddie's was a ghost of a building beneath the rattling tracks of the 4 train. It didn't exist on maps, which made it perfect. When Eddie, a man carved from granite and scars, opened the steel door, he looked from the bruised Stella to the shivering Rocco Moretti. "Phantom," Eddie grunted. "You brought a stray." "I brought a partner," Stella corrected, guiding the fallen king inside. For 2 weeks, the gym became their entire universe. Rocco stripped of his suit's wealth, and soldiers had to rebuild himself from zero. The dynamic shifted completely. Inside these ropes, Stella was the master, and Rocco was the student. "You fight with ego," Stella told him on the 3rd day, circling him on the canvas. She batted his heavy jab away effortlessly. "Anger makes you predictable. Predictable makes you dead. Don't try to break the wave, Rocco. Be the water." Rocco was frustrated, his body aching, but he watched her with growing fascination. He saw how she calculated every angle, how she moved with an economy of force that was hypnotic. The arrogance that had defined him was slowly burned away by sweat and exhaustion, replaced by a steely respect. One night, after a grueling grappling session, they lay panting on the canvas. "Why did you leave the life?" Rocco asked, staring at the peeling ceiling. "You're a tiger, Stella. You can't pretend to be a house cat." He reached out his hand, trembling slightly, and cupped her face. There was no cruelty in his eyes now, only reverence. "Help me take the city back, and I promise you won't have to hide anymore. We build a kingdom where the tiger walks free." Stella looked at him, searching for the lie, but found only resolve. "Okay," she whispered. They sat over blueprints in Eddie's office. The gallows had consolidated power and were hosting a coronation gala at the Obsidian on Saturday. "It's a fortress," Rocco noted, tracing the perimeter. 50 guards, metal detectors. We can't get weapons in." "We don't need to fight 50 men," Stella said, her voice cool. The gallows are superstitious. They think you're dead. If the ghost walks through the front door, they will freeze. That freeze buys us 3 seconds. And in 3 seconds, Stella smiled a terrifying expression that promised violence. In 3 seconds, we take the head off the snake. Saturday night at the Obsidian was a display of vulgar excess. Champagne flowed, and the bass shook the crystal chandeliers. Don Carlo Gallo sat in Rocco's old booth, drunk on power, surrounded by sycophants. "To Rocco Moretti," Carlo shouted, raising a glass. "May he rot in the sewers." The room erupted in laughter. Then the main breaker, which Stella had rigged in the alley, tripped. The club plunged into absolute darkness. Confusion rippled through the crowd. 10 seconds later, the emergency lights flickered on, bathing the room in an eerie red glow. Standing in the center of the dance floor was Rocco Moretti. He was clean-shaven, wearing a vintage tuxedo borrowed from Eddie. He looked untouched. He looked immortal. Beside him stood a woman in a sleek, backless black dress. Her hair loose, holding a suppressed pistol she had swiped from the doorman in the confusion. "Carlo," Rocco's voice boomed over the stunned silence. "You're sitting in my chair." Carlo scrambled up, pale as a sheet. You're dead." "I was. But I didn't like the accommodations in hell." Rocco walked slowly toward the VIP section. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. "Kill him!" Carlo screamed, his voice cracking. "Kill them both!" 4 guards near the booth drew their weapons. Stella didn't hesitate. She kicked a heavy table onto its side, creating instant cover. "Go!" Rocco didn't cower. He vaulted the table, moving with a speed he had never possessed before. The lead bodyguard, a giant named Tiny, swung a massive haymaker. Old Rocco would have blocked it. New Rocco slipped the punch a microscopic movement to the left. As Tiny's momentum carried him forward, Rocco drove his fist into the man's liver. The shovel hook. Tiny collapsed instantly, gasping for air. Stella was a whirlwind beside him, covering his blind spots. She used a champagne bottle to smash a knife from a guard's hand and drove a high heel into another's knee. She wasn't fighting. She was dancing. Within 30 seconds, the guards were groaning on the floor. Rocco reached the VIP booth. Carlo fumbled for a gold-plated revolver, but Rocco grabbed his wrist, twisting until the bone snapped with a sickening crunch. Rocco slammed Carlo's face into the table amidst the spilled wine. "You broke the truce," Rocco whispered into Carlo's ear. "You killed Luca. You tried to hunt us like animals." "Please," Carlo sobbed. "I'll give you everything. Just let me go." Rocco looked at Stella. She nodded once. "You don't get to leave, Carlo," Rocco said, straightening his tie. "I'm not going to kill you. That's too easy." Sirens wailed in the distance. "I planted your private ledgers on the FBI server 5 minutes ago," Stella said, holstering her weapon. "You'll rot in a supermax for the rest of your life. A slow death." 3 months later. The Obsidian had been renovated. The velvet was gone, replaced by sharp, modern leather. The fear was gone, replaced by respect. Rocco stood on the balcony looking down at his kingdom. The door opened, and Stella walked in. She wore a tailored suit that matched his, cutting a sharp silhouette against the city lights. She handed him a glass of sparkling water. The Russians agreed to the new terms. No weapons, only cybersecurity contracts. Good. Rocco set the glass down and pulled her close, his hands resting on her waist. He looked at her. Really looked at her not as a weapon, not as a waitress, but as his equal. "You know," he murmured, a playful glint in his eye, "I still owe you $15,000 for that suit you ruined." Stella laughed, a sound that was rare and beautiful. "I think we're even, Rocco. I saved your life. You saved mine." "No," Rocco said softly. "I didn't save you. I just gave you a bigger arena." He kissed her. It wasn't the kiss of a boss and a subordinate. It was the kiss of two predators who had finally found the only other creature on Earth who understood them. The waitress was gone. The phantom was retired. Now she was the queen. And God help anyone who challenged the throne. What a ride from a trembling waitress spilling wine to a lethal partner ruling the underworld. Stella and Rocco's journey proves that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones we underestimate. This story wasn't just about mafia violence. It was about trauma, recognizing your own worth, and finding an equal in a world of hierarchies. Rocco had to lose everything to see the woman standing right in front of him, and Stella had to stop running to finally find a home. If you enjoyed this dramatic saga of karma, action, and romance, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss the next story. What did you think of Stella's transformation? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.